am gonna review this movie. Why? Because I'm a freaking movie man. And today we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Yes, folks, it is that time of the year again for our next, I can't even say annual installment. They crank these puppies out like there's no tomorrow. But we have our newest Marvel film, this time being the end, I believe the end of the Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy, as it were. Although at the end it says the legendary Star-Lord, as stipulated in Chris Pratt's contract. All these characters, they're liable to come back up in the future Marvel films, any that are left anyway. But here we have the end of the James Gunn Guardians trilogy. And impressively enough, James Gunn, who I guess we're getting right into it, the director of this, James Gunn, he's been able to stay the director of each and every single one of these. Props. It's good to see direction didn't change. Oftentimes, when it comes to Disney films and their franchises, or even Marvel, direction can change hands during production a whole lot. It seems like for the most part, the core artistic vision of this fella has been kept true. If you don't know who James Gunn is, he's actually been doing in my opinion, I know there's a lot of haters out there. I really like him. I love just about whatever he does. He's been a writer for years and years, but in terms of, what has he directed? Why does that name sound familiar? Technically, his directorial debut was this film called Slither, which is it's a great little sci-fi horror survival creature feature, blood, gore galore, with some fairly big names attached to it that also carry over to a lot of his different films. But I liked Slither a lot. The last time that I covered him, although the most recent thing he did besides this movie was the Peacemaker series on HBO Max, or just Max now, I guess, he did direct The Suicide Squad, the far superior Suicide Squad, the one that made it into my top 10 for the year it came out. I think James Gunn is very consistent with his quality of films, and I, for one, am very curious and optimistic to see what he's going to bring to the future of DC, given the crashing and burning and rearranging and new order that's being established that they're kind of putting him at the head of. Say what you want, I'm sure there's plenty of people that are still demanding the Snyder cut of the universe. It's a dream that I would love to share with you. I'm not a huge fan of Zack Snyder's work. I respect him as a director, but Gunn's here. We're getting off topic. First of all, I do want to put out a little warning here, because they allude to it in their marketing and the trailers and whatnot. It's alluded to, so you kind of know what to expect. But know this going in. I got a warning before I went in, and luckily this type of thing doesn't. It's unfortunate, but it doesn't faze me too much. I'm a psychopath, so I have a strong constitution. There is a lot of animal cruelty in this film. The worst of it is implied and is done off camera or is blurred out. There is still some animal cruelty on screen. It's adorable animals that have had genetic modifications done that are clearly in pain. It's tough to watch, so I completely understand if you want to skip this one, or if you want, when these scenes come up in the movie, you close your peepers and you can kind of audibly tell when those scenes have passed. But just a warning, because they don't really make it too abundant. I normally don't do trigger warnings, but I get it. I had some friends with me. More than a couple of us were viscerally affected by that, so I thought it was worth mentioning. So it may not affect me. I understand it might get to you. The cast is the same. There's no point in bringing up all the big boy and girl names. If you know of the Guardians, you know who's in it. If not, look at a poster real quick and you can see the big heavy hitters, some of which you probably know, some of which you might not know. But the new additions that I did want to make mention of that I liked a lot. So there's one of the obvious ones who I guess he's kind of I'll have a little bit of spoiler talk at the very end just to make a few notes about their execution here, but I will say Will Poulter, who I like, and who I guess, what is the last thing I covered him on? He's in Midsommar. He is Adam Warlock, who is the spiritual brother of Thanos. They don't really delve too much into it, but in the comics, Thanos is the embodiment of death. Adam Warlock is supposed to be the embodiment of life, but in this, he's like taken early out of his pod or chamber or whatever, and he's just kind of like a part of the Sovereign, like a being of like great strength and stuff. I don't know, maybe they'll go more into it. I'm not sure 100% what the MCU's take on this is going to be, but I liked it. When at best I liked it. Chukwudi, I keep messing up his name, but he's our primary antagonist in this film, and I think he does a very good job. I don't find him to be a relatable, like, oh, maybe he has a point antagonist, but he's very compelling in that he's very good at being an evil, egotistical person bent on being God and reshaping things to his image and just being able to do despicable things, be hateable, and play that really well. So he plays a very good villain. Again, someone from another one of James Gunn's work. A lot of actors that are in this have been in other works of James Gunn. It's always cool to see now that we're crossing both sides of the DC and the Marvel boards. It's funny. But Guardians 3, what did I think? Before I went to this, I try to remain unbiased when it comes to, like, oh, you know, going to see this movie. I try to avoid reviews, but me being the social media addict that I am, it's very difficult for me not to see anything. I heard mostly positive stuff, but then I heard a couple people that were very displeased with it, but it was mostly positive. The reception I was getting was all across the board, so I definitely had to see this for myself. I really enjoyed it. It's really good with some like fantastic moments here and there. Out of the Guardians trilogy, it's a solid closer. It's a really solid way to end the trilogy. Is it my favorite of the Guardians movies? No, I don't think so. I don't know, it might be my least favorite, but that's not saying that it's a bad movie. I'm just saying out of all 1, 2, 3 of the Guardians of the Galaxy films, like, there's a lot of good in this film, but there's also, like, some bad in terms of just Marvel being Marvel. Without spoiling what happens, this does put a nice kind of, like, it wraps it up. It brings the Guardians story, like, to a close, and still leaves room for there to be Guardians' involvement in future Marvel films. So I think all things considered, they had several main characters that all got like equal enough screen time and care and were developed and then were also closed out, and I think it was handled well. I enjoyed it. I didn't think any character was given a disservice necessarily. Rocket is the narrative star of the show, and I believe, unless I'm mistaken, I think in all the Guardians films, I know people are like, oh, Groot, oh, Drax. Drax is a close second for me. I like Drax and Mantis a lot, but Rocky Raccoon, hands down, is my favorite of the Guardians for obvious and also nuanced reasons. Well, even though he doesn't have the most screen time in this one, he still has a lot of screen time, and his narrative presence is like very dominant. I mean, you even see it in the trailer. We're given Rocket flashbacks to like how he grew up and what he went through, and it ties into the main antagonist and then the narrative here and the themes of the Guardians and, you know, misfits and, you know, imperfect beings in an imperfect world. Solid action. I mean, granted, there's still like leaps and bounds of CGI, but on this one, unlike something like Quantumania, I felt like a lot of the CG in this looked, I never thought it looked weak. I think they were practical wherever they could be in terms of costuming, makeup, set design, set pieces. And then, you know, I mean, obviously they had to have a lot of like digital work here and there, but even when there was digital work, I think this is that's like one of the better effects packages that I've seen in a Marvel film as of late. The action was good. I love the opening action piece because there is like an action set piece toward the opening. I love how serious stuff gets throughout the film. That's another thing. I know I already mentioned animal cruelty, but there is serious thematic material that is breached and discussed and shown on screen. I'm like, again, surprised. I know I was surprised when Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness did what it did with the PG-13 rating. This almost, in some instances, surpasses that. Just like the trauma and the violence and what's implied and also what's shown. This is a hard PG-13. Literally, it's the first Marvel film to actually have the word fuck. Or I guess fucking in this case, but it's not used in the most serious of manner, but it's used it's used pretty well in the scene. I think it was like, okay, well that's how very Guardians of the Galaxy, how very James Gunn of you. Speaking of Rocket, as I dipped into a little bit earlier, his backstory, A+. You get a full backstory for Rocket Raccoon, and A+ in that whole sequence, which, by the way, These guys, oh my god. We have Teefs, we have Floor, we got the whole gang. All these little critters, I'd die for all of them. You just try to touch them, I will run you down, I will run you through. As I always say, comedy is subjective, and I acknowledge that. That being said, for me personally, like 2/3 of the comedy in this film work. Hell, 2/3 of this film work really well for me. But there is, I don't even want to say a third. It's like a little bit less than a third, maybe a quarter. A quarter of this film, and I guess we're getting kind of into cons. A quarter of this film falls victim to some of the usual Marvel pitfalls. Like, even James Gunn can't elevate the entire thing. But for me, I will admit, is it formulaic? Yeah, I mean, every story that can be told has been told, but it gets to a point where it's still it's formulaic, kind of like how Marvel films usually go. You can kind of see where certain things are going. Like, for the most part, the dialogue is fine, if not great. There are some great moments of dialogue in this film, but sometimes the script just gets a little bit expository, and I get that Chris Pratt, Star-Lord, is headstrong, but when you're like, what are we gonna do? And he's like, I'm gonna rescue my best friend because he's my best friend and because I love him, so we're gonna rescue him because that's the right thing to do for your best friend. Like, it's just, I poked fun at it at the beginning of this, but there's even a bit where it's like, Rocket, why did you do this? And then he literally verbatim, he's like, because I'm a freaking guardian of the galaxy. And I'm just like, I'm happy for him in the moment, and what he did in the scene is good and all, and that's fine, but to me that's cringe. That's cringy dialogue. That's it works if you're like the Batman somehow, right? You're like, who are you? I'm Vengeance, I'm Batman. But Superman, why did you not kill that crook that was gonna destroy City Hall? Because I am the Superman. It's that kind of vibe.
What, we some kind of Suicide Squad?
I will say a little pro I did forget to add, cried twice in this movie. Both times were because of a raccoon, so take that for what you will. When I take a film that's part of a franchise or a sequel or a series, part of the quality test that I give it is, would this film work by itself? There are Marvel films out there where context and the framework of the entire MCU, they make sense even more and you can appreciate them even more. But I'm also always curious to see, how well does Thor 2, how well does Shang-Chi, how well do these films work on them by themselves? I feel like Guardians of the Galaxy Vol. 3 technically could work and stand on its own 2 feet, but even as me, from my perspective, I should have rewatched the first 2 movies. As I was going through, I had to remind myself, because they just drop you in, which is fair and fun. I appreciate they're not going to spoon feed you, but it helps to be knowledgeable with the Guardians universe, the world, the characters. It just helps to contextualize the movie further. And again, you have a greater appreciation because these are characters you've come to know and love, as opposed to being an outsider who just stumbled into this movie with no other MCU knowledge. It doesn't work as well by itself. I recognize the fact that it's because it's meant to work as a trilogy, but yeah, I mean, overall, I got to see it in IMAX. It was a rip-roaring good time. It's a fun sci-fi action movie that had very surprisingly dramatic moments, fleshed out characters that we already knew even more. You'll get emotional probably if you care about them. There were some endearing moments, some funny moments, a few hilarious moments that wasn't already shown by the trailers. Don't think you have it all figured out from the trailer. Luckily they didn't ruin too much. Skip ahead if you want, but spoiler talk. I really wanted Will Poulter's character Adam Warlock to be more than he was, but since the whole plot element was that he was birthed too soon, he was basically this OP superpowered guy, but he was kind of still a child in the head, so he was just well, that hurts. Mother, what is going on? Mother, why would that hurt? I felt like he was almost given the MODOK treatment. You take a character who you visually speaking, and also from a narrative standpoint, is supposed to be a super fucking overpowered character, and then you're oh no, but he's a joke, ha, slap that knee, and it's I don't like when Marvel does that. Giving a comedic relief character, sure, but why would you give someone so overpowered? Sure, overpowered in the mind of a child, cool, and his first scene in the film is great because he's fucking shit up. But then it gets nerfed because then all of a sudden it's he's just following mommy around and he's grossly incompetent. But I will say, unlike MODOK, I much preferred Adam Warlock's character arc in this than what ends up happening to MODOK in Quantumania. I don't usually do this, but I didn't have the energy to get the whole setup back up again. Since we're in spoiler talk, a couple other little things I wanted to add. I did like how once once he went down, his life was in danger. I do like how, like, Star-Lord, Chris Pratt's character, he immediately was like, okay, what I gotta do, whatever I gotta do, I'm gonna do it. Just tell me what to do. I'm gonna fix this. I'm gonna save my best friend right now. I'm gonna save him. So I did like how, like, all the Guardians, like, banded together, because without question they were like, yeah, Rocket's in danger. We're gonna do whatever we have to save him. Well, it's very sad that, Star-Lord and Gamora, after the snap and all that, Gamora no longer remembers Star-Lord, so it's not going to be a thing anymore. That's all well and good. Am I the only one? I don't think so, because I think Twitter agrees. I really kind of ship Star-Lord and Nebula. Like, I don't know what it is. I kind of wish something would have happened there. I know it's played for a joke in the trailer. It's played for a joke in the movie. But low-key, Nebula's a ride or die. And she's, like, her character arc has been great. And clearly she cares very much about the Guardians and very much about, like, she doesn't even question it. As soon as Rocket's in danger and Star-Lord's like, yeah, we got to snap into action. What does Nebula do? She's like, yeah, what do we got to do? We'll make it work. But I low-key would have liked to have seen Star-Lord and Nebula kind of try to make things work. But, that's a fan fiction for another day. Also, can I just say, if we're doing spoiler talk still, I am absolutely shocked. I am gobsmacked that no one died. Like, it's in true, like, Disney and Marvel fashion, like, people aren't allowed to die. We have, like, a close call or two, and a close call that's not even, like, an earned close call. It's like a technicality on a bad roll in a D&D session. If you watch the movie, you know what I mean. But then they immediately, like, pull it back and are like, oh no, JK, they're okay. That being said, it was still bittersweet and sad at the end, and I still was here for the story, and I'm glad nobody died, but I'm just shocked that nobody did. Anyway, I've prattled on way long enough. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. It's really good, with some pretty fantastic moments here and there. It has its pitfalls, thanks in part to, like, writing, some narrative elements, and just kind of, like, Marvel being Marvel. But overall, James Gunn, I think he did it again. At the very least, he made a really good film. So I easily give it a low 4 out of 5. A low 4 out of 5 is the best that I can give it in good conscience. I would be down to see it again. I didn't love it, but I really enjoyed it. I had a good time. It got me in all the emotions, and yeah, it's a great film. So no major complaints. Thank you guys and gals so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of whatever movie I review. And goodbye, travelers.